This is hands down going to be one of the most important XRP videos you've ever watched. If you own XRP or if you're thinking about buying XRP, watch this entire video because it just got a whole lot easier. What I mean by that is I used to think getting to a 5-digit XRP, this was going to take maybe a decade or two. Now, I think we can do this a lot sooner. And the reason is the market cap multiplier effect. This is going to be a journey. Strap in, buckle in. Let's go ahead and get into this. This is the math on a $10,000 XRP. We would need $580 trillion. Just a simple $580 trillion at a 58 billion circulating supply. This doesn't seem probable anytime soon. But this clip I watched just a few days ago, it changed my entire thought process on market cap, and I aim to change your thought process too. We first need to understand what the multiplier effect really is, and then I'm going to show you fact-based math, how he actually gets to these calculations, and what we could actually expect in the future for XRP's market cap. Let's go. If you get any value from this content, guys, please hit like. We're going to go for 5,000 likes on this video. With your help, we can get there. Let's do it.
When XRP was trading at 50 cents, there wasn't much TA to do on XRP, right? You're not really playing around with much. Now that it's been moving, one of the things that I've been closely watching has been the order books and the inflows. And something that we've talked about is this market cap multiplier is the term that I use. And basically what we've observed is the market cap multiplier on XRP is anywhere from 50 to 200x on the way up. And I've seen it interacted even more dramatic on the way down, where the multiplier has been 500 or 900x. And what that means is if $1 billion is coming into XRP through the order books, that the market cap is going to grow by 50 billion. So it's not a 1-to-1 ratio. And there's been this whole miscommunication, misunderstanding really of how this works, because people are locked into that traditional mindset of market cap to value stocks versus trying to value this technology and this network, and understanding that these assets are actually much more illiquid than the stock market is. And so they move much more dramatically. But to this point, folks think it's crazy to talk about these high numbers. Like even talking about $30 XRP, people say I should be shut down. Yeah. Well, let's look at the math. I did the numbers, and if JP Morgan's prediction, and don't come at me, bring it up with JP Morgan, they predict 4 to 8 billion of inflows into XRP ETFs year one. Now I ran with the 200x multiplier on that. It brings us to a market cap growth of 1.7 trillion. That's trillion with a T. And if XRP is at a market cap of a couple hundred billion at the time, you're running up towards a 2 trillion market cap. It's a $30 XRP with the 58 billion circulating supply that we just hit. So it's going to take way less inflows to get us to these astronomical far off market caps than what people have traditionally been thinking. When I started to go through this exercise and follow these numbers, I got way more bullish. Because I realized, wow, it's going to be way easier to get to these high price targets than I'd previously thought.
Absolutely.
And so people will call us crazy for talking about $30 XRP, $100 XRP, $1,000 XRP, because they're doing the market cap calculation. And they're saying, well, Zach, that's 50 trillion market cap. That's bigger than all the stocks combined. And you say, well, yes, this is solving a problem that's quite frankly bigger than all the stocks combined, potentially. And to your point, if we just get slivers, little pieces of this action on Swift derivatives, and we could easily see XRP go to these prices. You combine that with the inflows on the ETFs, etc. It's going to be a lot easier to go to these higher prices than people are thinking.
I've listened to this clip maybe 30 times right now. And my first job here, or my first thought process was, how do I show you this math? How do I figure this math out for myself so I can verify what he's saying? Well, I did just that. I spent a few days on Twitter, but it was worth it. I have to thank Chad Steingraber for the information, and of course, Zach Rector for opening my eyes to the multiplier effect on the XRP ledger. Now, we need to start here, okay? This is a 12-hour move for XRP. XRP jumped 20 cents. It went from $2.48 to $2.68 on a net inflow of 114.61 million. People bought $114.61 million worth of XRP in 12 hours, okay? And that $114 million is equal to 20 cents and a market cap of $11.399 billion added to the market cap. So let's work this backwards to find out what type of multiplier effect we are seeing in this current price move. Now, when I put all of the information just as you see here, and I asked, what is the multiplier effect? Here we go. They have the 11.399 billion over the 114 million inflow, and we're getting a multiplier effect of 99.5, which means if $1 billion in value came in inflows, it would affect the market cap $99.5 billion. That is insane, right? It's making it 100 times easier to get to where we need to go. But I was still like reluctant. This is one use case or one scenario. I needed to do 3, 4, 5 different scenarios to really understand how much of an impact this is. And does it change with certain parameters? Yes, it does. Let me show you that in just a second here. I also wanted to understand the $8 billion in ETF inflows, what type of impact that would have to the price at a 99.5% market multiplier. And that would bring the price of the XRP to $15.95. Zach used a 200x multiplier, and that's how he got to his $30. Okay. Also, this was just to verify the information. I also wanted to better understand the same exact math, but what would $1 trillion do? So here is that. It had to reprogram the multiplier, which it found at 99.5. And then I asked, what happens if we add $1 trillion worth of value? Remember, when we're talking about derivatives, real estate, debt, the tokenization of treasury bonds, $1 trillion isn't insane. If there's $1.4 quadrillion in public markets, we are talking about like what, 0.01% or something really, really small compared to how much money is actually out there, right? So here is the math on this. If $1 trillion and we added the 99.5 multiplier, we would be looking at a $1,700 XRP with only $1 trillion added. Now, isn't that much easier to get to 4 digits than it used to be? Absolutely. This is why this is such a groundbreaking discovery, and it's blown my mind. Like seriously, it's blown my mind. Using the math above, if we added 5 trillion or 10 trillion, what would be the price? Here it is. Here is 5 trillion at 99.5 multiplier, 8,573. If you wanted to do 10 trillion with a 99.5 multiplier, we would be at a $17,146 per XRP. This is with 58 billion circulating supply right there. Okay. So now what we need to do is run the numbers again. Now, if you want to gather your own data and information off of inflows and outflows, you can do that on CoinGlass. I'm sure there's other technologies that you can use. This is just something that I found super helpful when I was doing this. Please check it out if you want to. Here is another scenario. Here's another 1 hour move. Net inflows of 41.58 million. Price jumped 20 cents from 232 to 252. And it had a market cap of almost $20 billion from this 41 million. So here we go. So let's better understand this. I put all the calculations and math in here. It put it into the system. And this actually had a multiplier effect extremely, extremely high. This is the highest result I got. I tend not to use this because 479 is really off the spectrum, but you can see how we got to that information. It was just basically how much money actually went into XRP and how much of an impact it actually had on the market cap. That's how we got to this 497, times. I thought that was really, really high. I also wanted to re-verify and run the numbers a second time just to make sure what I was seeing was correct. It did come up with a different calculation that if we, hypothetically $1 trillion investment, it's using the same ratio, 1 trillion using this 479x, this would give us a $4,800 XRP just with 1 trillion. So, 2 trillion, we're at 10,000. So let's do this again, right? Here's another big move. From a low of 208 to 235, a 27% increase on $54 million net inflow. This also affected the market cap, $15.49 billion. Now, this is always different depending on circulating supply, how much is being bought and sold at any given time. There's all of these different factors that can kind of skew the numbers. So you just want to keep testing the model if you decide to do this yourself. Here is the math on this. Here is everything I put in: 27% increase, $54 million net inflow, and almost a $15.5 billion market cap. It puts together all of the information here. Let's see, this one came with a 287x multiplier. It said 287 to 290. And then I asked it, if we put $1 trillion into this at a 287x, this would give us a $287 trillion market cap with 1 trillion. If we remember back here, we need 580 trillion to get to 10K. Using this information, we can see that we are almost at that number just with $2 trillion, right? Pretty insane. The multiplier effect, it has a very, very big difference. I also thought this was great. I found 589. Check this out. Variability of multiplier. The market cap multiplier for XRP has been observed to range from 50x to 589x, depending on the situation. This variability means that the actual impact of a large inflow like $1 trillion could differ significantly from the initial calculation. So it's very difficult to be exact here, but you get the picture here. We can range from 99 all the way up to 200, maybe even up to 589, which is, I wonder, is that where the 589 came from? All right. I wanted to show you a few other things here. With Ripple's advancements with the XRP EVM sidechain, we have to start thinking about derivatives. Listen to this clip.
Trading and value transfer is definitely a sweet spot there. But when it comes to more complex operations or highly specific, financial protocols, that's not the sweet spot. And the XRP Ledger community doesn't necessarily want it to be. So that's where we can really lean on our Axelar partnership, use general message passing, and actually allow applications to develop their tokenization engine on XRPL mainnet, their trading engine on XRPL mainnet, and then tap into, advanced derivatives and other capabilities on the EVM sidechain. And those users never actually have to move their wallet or interact with the sidechain itself. So it's a very seamless experience and really allows for the best of both worlds and is made possible by Axelar.
All right. Remember, the derivatives market is a over $1 quadrillion market. This is just the public market. Can you imagine bringing 5, 10, $20 trillion on the XRP ledger using a 50x multiplier? That could be just an insane move in price. That is why a lot of people believe the price of XRP will just in 1 second, when they turn this value on, when they bring this value on chain, it'll have a profound impact on me and you, plus every other XRP holder out there. Man, this feels good to get this down. All right. There's also, it is a lot of people see, look, XRP will add 5 trillion to its market cap overnight. If XRP added 5 trillion to its market cap with a 99x multiplier, you would be looking at a $500 trillion market cap for XRP and almost a $10,000 XRP. Even if it's a 50x multiplier and this only went to 250 trillion, you would still be over a $5,000 XRP. You would be retired. All right. There's a few other things I want to show you here. This is also a good clip from Brad Garlinghouse. He expects $10 trillion to be coming into the market. The XRP ledger is primed to capture some of that value. Let me play it.
So give me a specific example of who's going to use it.
So one of the things we've always said is I don't think banks will be the first customers. We've talked about payment providers. And so we have run pilots out there with the MoneyGrams, Western Unions, Mercury FX, a couple of others. And those are payment providers that have massive treasury operations, using, one random example.
As you listen to this, remember, every big bank has a ginormous treasury. There could be securities, there could be just money. All of that value eventually will wind up on a blockchain. And this is what you can imagine, right? Even Bank of America, if they brought their treasury and their value onto the XRP ledger, you're talking about $2 to $3 trillion from one bank. Can you imagine that Ripple has hundreds of banking partnerships? What if those banks want to create their own stablecoin and they start bringing value from the real world onto the XRP ledger through RLUSD or their version of RLUSD? Bank of America could have their own real USD, right? Bank of America coin, JP Morgan coin, Citibank coin. They could all have it and it wouldn't be a siloed system. The reason you want to do this on an interoperable system is because that money can then move across the world seamlessly, right? If everybody created their own stable coins on their own blockchains, that would create the same exact problem that we have today, a siloed system that is costly, slow, and it's just sad to use, right? Let me continue this.
Example, you have a payment provider that has hundreds of millions of dollars of negative working capital because they've taken their dollars or their pesos and they've pre-funded and they've pre-funded the account. So they go into Mexico once a week. Let's say they'll wire $10 million to Mexico and then debit along the way. Now, sometimes they overfund, sometimes they underfund. The ability to have real-time liquidity is transformational. The global pre-funded, what are called Nostra-Vostra relationships, it represents something on the order of magnitude $10 trillion. If we can make that more efficient and more useful, we can actually accelerate the engine of commerce kind of on a global basis.
All right, there's one other clip that I wanted to show you before I got out of here. Max Avery talking about market cap. Guys, listen, if you made it this far and you haven't hit like, you haven't left a comment, you haven't told me how you're feeling after you just heard this information, are you going to go test this yourself? Do you believe the market cap multiplier, right? Hopefully this news has created a spark inside of you that you want to start researching this yourself and get in there and start working with Perplexity or ChatGPT, start giving it value, start understanding the inflows and outflows around the XRP ledger and start really getting a handle on the multiplier effect. Because ladies and gentlemen, just a few $1 trillion added to the XRP ledger and bam, we are all the 1%, right? We are all joining the 1% if and when that value comes on. I can't wait.
You've probably heard people say that XRP can't hit big numbers because of market cap. Well, what if I told you they're completely wrong? And here's why. Everyone's using an outdated playbook. They're treating XRP like it's a stock. But here's the thing. XRP isn't a company. It's a global payment network, and that changes everything about what we're talking about. You have to remember that XRP is a utility for the entire financial system's plumbing. For XRP to handle global payments, it needs liquidity. Basically, it needs enough value to move massive amounts of money instantly, and we're talking about trillions of dollars in daily transactions. If you think that sounds too wild, remember that 20 years ago, people laughed at the idea of trillion-dollar companies even existing. Now we have several, and everything's totally changed. Here's what most people miss. XRP's value won't come from traders buying and selling. It'll come from banks and businesses actually using it to move money. The more money that needs to move, the more value XRP needs to have. Simple as that. So next time someone tells you that XRP can't reach certain prices because of market cap, remember this. They're using old rules for a completely new game. The potential isn't set by market cap. It's limited by how much of the world's money needs to move. And that number, it's bigger than you think. The future of money isn't about market cap at all. It's about utility. And that changes everything about what's possible.
And that changes everything about what's possible. Thank you for making this one of the biggest XRP channels on YouTube and in the world. It is an honor. It is an honor to be on this journey with you. I care about you. I want you to learn. I want you to grow. I want you to go and teach others because we are really investing in the future in value. And this is really the greatest time in your life to make generational wealth. Just stay tuned, stay busy. Let's get it. I've been Crypto Sensei. Thank you for spending this time with me. Aloha.